Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
This show is a proud member of the On Us All Podcast Network.
I want the future to be unknown. I want to become a whole person. Welcome, Systematic Geekologists, to an episode in our bonus series for the spring. We are talking about loop movies, time loops, where causality runs backwards to how time normally works. And I am joined by Evan. How are you doing, Evan?
Doing well. Hopefully I'm not in a time loop. But
We hope not. Yeah. I'm Andy Walsh, and we are excited to be talking about the movie 12 Monkeys today as part of this On Loop series. We do these bonus series now 5 times a year, come at you every Friday for a 6-week period in January, the spring, summer, Halloween, and Christmas. And for this spring series, we're trying to connect to our annual theme, The Faces Behind Us, by talking about movies where the main character or one of the main characters is themselves a face behind themselves through the magic of time travel. They go back in time and have some influence on their own past that leads to the events that they already know happen in the future, whether they are aware of, infecting their past or not. So we've got movies like Interstellar. We've got things like Darkwing Duck, and today we are talking about 12 Monkeys. And you can check out the show notes for, or the description for all of the other episodes in this series. There'll be a playlist there that you can click on and get all those other episodes that I talked about from the past and or the future. So that's what we're up to today. And Evan, why don't you say a little bit about 12 Monkeys? What are your first memories of it? What's your kind of first reaction? We've just finished watching the movie, and what were your first reactions to the film?
Sure. So I was about probably 10 years old when this movie came out, and I was aware of it, but I never saw it because of my age. I guess my dad didn't want to take me, but the name and the poster always intrigued me. So I never saw it until now, and I'm excited I saw it because it was well worth the hype, and it's very much a product of his time, but still it had some everlasting tendencies to it. So I thought.
Okay, so you watched it for this podcast, and that was your first time seeing it.
Correct.
All right. What's one thing that stood out to you above everything else from your first watch there?
That it felt like a foreign film. It felt like I was watching a dubbed version of something, and I thought that was a unique take from Terry Gilliam, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you familiar with the origins of the movie?
I am not. I do not know the lore. I just no.
Okay, so it is inspired by a French language short film called La Jetée.
Oh wow!
That Terry Gilliam saw and wanted to, was inspired by to make this film. I watched that short film for the first time in preparation for this podcast.
Okay.
It is also about time travel and a time loop where a man sees winds up in a situation where he sees himself as a child and realizes that he is playing out the events of a memory that he had from his boyhood, being at the airport and seeing this man running around and ultimately, being killed at the airport. And so it turns out that he, through time travel, was that man that he had seen killed. And there's also the element of, he's traveling in time because scientists have sent him back in time to figure out how to resolve a crisis in the world that they would like to either undo or help people get out of. And so people are living underground, and they're trying to rebuild society from a sort of post-apocalypse situation. So those are the elements that carry over. And yeah, it's an interesting film. It's shot entirely in still photos, and so it's more of a montage or a slideshow of still images with French language narration over it, describing the plot and providing some dialogue. And yeah, so it's interesting that was your takeaway from, because in some ways it is kind of a foreign film, or at least has stronger foreign film vibes and pedigree than your typical.
It felt like that everything was overdubbed. Like the footsteps were very loud and super high, and the lips didn't quite match some of the dialogue, I thought, and stuff like that. So, but that's cool to see and hear that the original source, and he was very successful, I guess, in capturing that part of it, because it worked for me.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess by way of that, I kind of gave a rundown of La Jetée, which and the elements that overlap with 12 Monkeys. But why don't you say a little bit more about the story of 12 Monkeys for our listeners?
So it has that premise and that plot, and it plays tricks with us in that he kind of adds the mental health aspect to it, the portions of like how does time travel and the obsession with a certain goal that's going to save the world, how does that affect your psyche and stuff like that. So it does explore that in a mysterious way, where it builds up to the airport scene in a different scenes, and it reveals itself through a different characters until you get to the plot at the end, where things are kind of as they were to explain, but not really. So
yeah, it's a very twisty tale that is always playing with your understanding of what is real and what isn't, and why people are doing what they're doing. But yeah, the time loop elements are a little bit different than some of the other stories that we've talked about. Certainly, compared to Interstellar, by the end of Interstellar, he's reaching back in time, knowingly trying to influence events in the past. Whereas, Bruce Willis's, future, Bruce Willis is influencing his own future and his own past in complicated ways, but rarely intentionally. Right? He isn't right. He isn't trying to get to that airport situation. True. He's not. His future self is not trying to guide his past self to any particular, to recreate those events or to reach this fixed point. But it's more through happenstance that he comes to that situation. But yeah, and as I'm thinking about all the other movies in the series and other stories in the series, I'll remind you that you can go on Facebook and vote. That is how we decide these what's going to be included in these special series. So keep an eye out on the Facebook group, the Systematic Geekology Facebook group for that. And you can also be part of the conversation on the Discord server as well. There's suggestions and voting that goes on there as well. So be sure to check those out if you want to be included in what we talk about in the future. If you are excited about 12 Monkeys, great. If you would rather never hear about 12 Monkeys, then you can have a say in what a future episode or a future series might be all about. But yeah, so it was, I thought it was an interesting way that it kind of fulfilled the that faces behind us element of it. That he's not trying to live up to anything in particular, but he still winds up creating the circumstances that lead to his own destiny or the path that his story takes. And we should say that there is so the scientists in the future are trying to send Bruce Willis and other characters back in time. Bruce Willis and those other characters are all kind of prisoners. So there's that element of experimenting on prisoners and other sort of marginalized groups, right? That we know is not a great thing, is not an ethical thing, but is a temptation that many have succumbed to, and these future folks have succumbed to it as well. They're experimenting on prisoners whose crimes are never really particularly enumerated.
That's true.
And perhaps that's kind of the point, that it's not there. There is no crime for which this could be, which would justify this treatment.
Yeah.
Right. So they're sent back in time to try to either prevent, or I think more to the point, to try to find a cure for a pandemic that has wiped out most of the human population. A topic that is not at all relevant or current to the contemporary time.
I could not relate to it at all.
Yeah. So the 5 billion people die in 96, 97, just shortly after the film came out in 95. They set the apocalypse, and so the few 100,000 people, maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who survive are living underground because the air above ground is not considered safe to breathe because this virus is still circulating. And so they're hoping that if they go back to the source, that they can find some way to cure or otherwise inoculate themselves against this virus, so that they can return to living on the surface. And that's what the time travel is all about. And so so here's a question for you. There are hints along the way that Bruce Willis's own path through the movie is triggered by his own inadvertently by things that he sends, information that he sends back into the past and into the future. Do you think that the whole is your reading of the film that the entire pandemic situation is the result of these time travel explorations or not?
On the surface, I don't think so. I kind of took it at the face value from what they said, and I see it as a reaction to it. But I also see that could be it, and that's a part of the fun in the ending, where you have some certain players interacting with each other. But yeah, that's one of the big questions, and as it sets up, because Bruce Willis kind of, like you said, inadvertently sets up other things. So why not that whole pandemic? So yeah, I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily Bruce Willis's actions alone, but we ultimately find out that the virus is released by a single individual who seems to be obsessed with sort of the doomsday, the apocalypse, whether he's part of a cult or whether he's a lone figure. He's certainly acting alone, as far as we can see in the film. But part of his interest stems from a book that one of the other main characters, played by Madeline Stowe, writes. She interacts with Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis makes several jumps back in time to different periods of time, and after her first interaction with him, she's a psychologist, and she evaluates him because, of course, he's talking about coming from the future, and he doesn't have any sort of identification, so he winds up running afoul of the police in 1990 when he first shows up, and they refer him to her because he is exhibiting signs of having mental health struggles, and she doesn't believe that he's a time traveler, but becomes interested in the psychology of doomsday prophecies and researches all these different doomsday prophets and scenarios that from the past, from like medieval France, I think, or somewhere in Europe, Western Europe,
different things in the U.S. at different times, and writes a whole book about it. And one of the fun hints, is that the various people that she winds up researching are all of these time travelers from the future who showed up at various different times, because they point out that the time they're still figuring out the time travel, so they wind up in the wrong place and the wrong time regularly.
Okay.
And so these various agents have shown up in various points in the past for brief periods of time and become prophets of doom, because they're all warning about that. They're all trying to prevent this disease outbreak. And so we see the man who eventually winds up spreading the virus at a book signing and interested in this book. So it kind of raises the question of whether all of these efforts throughout that inadvertently went through through hundreds of years of history, if they all resulted or
right,
gave this guy the idea for an outbreak of the disease.
Oh yeah, I didn't quite really pick up on that one. Yeah, her being the psychiatrist, I remember that there were some. I felt like there were some clues I wasn't picking up on, like some of the lines that she was saying, and to some of the blocking of the scene. And I was like, there are clues here, and I'm not really picking them up. So that seems like that could have been it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had the benefit. This is fourth or fifth time watching the film. I saw it in college shortly after it first came out. This was, for me, the Brad Pitt film that kind of turned me on to questioning consumerism and things like that. I think for many people, it's Fight Club.
Right. This is the pre-Fight Club.
But
sure.
For me, the sci-fi vibes, the Terry Gilliam of it all. This was the film for me that went, oh, interesting. He's not right about everything that he's saying, but he's not entirely wrong either.
Yeah.
And it was interesting coming back to it now. I did rewatch it to make sure it was fresh in my mind for this podcast, and it was interesting hearing some of the things that he's saying. So Brad Pitt plays this character that Bruce Willis comes across in an institution, and Brad Pitt. You're not really sure what Brad Pitt's diagnosis is, or if he is really mentally ill, or if he is just inconvenient because of his sort of radical ideas about society and so forth. He certainly presents himself that way, as someone who is being persecuted for his radical ideas about the establishment, rather than having a mental illness. And it was interesting to hear some of the things he's saying, going, well, I haven't said exactly that, but like in the past few years, I have thought things that are maybe sympathetic to some of the things that he's saying. And how does that?
He shows up in other things too.
And so these are. I'm sure this was not the first story with those ideas, and certainly not the last story with characters who say things like that. But I think Terry Gilliam is. Brazil's another film that comes to mind, where about characters who are struggling against the system of society, the bureaucracy, the layers of the system that just sort of were there to keep you from doing what you really want to do, what you were born to do, and so forth. So I think that's an idea that resonates strongly with him. I think he sees himself as a voice of the counterculture, a voice of a contrarian, but certainly a voice of the minority.
And that kind of became a voice of a generation, almost a part of that. There was a part of that culture, and a Fight Club, and I would say probably Wanted, stuff like that. Did that, and Brad Pitt didn't help with making it cool, so he kind of validated it, because he did do a great job capturing that stereotypical, like that kind of manicness of his thoughts, and like you said, his oppression of the system and stuff. So,
he was very good at the time at coming across, at giving off that energy of disaffected youth. Somebody who doesn't quite fit in.
Son of a billionaire, stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. So he turns out to be the son of a very rich virologist, which is an odd combination you don't see very often.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Perhaps there was family money, and that's how he chose to use it. But yeah, so he's the son of this virologist whose lab turns out to be the source of the virus, and there's a thought that Brad Pitt might be the reason for the outbreak, but he turns out to just be an animal activist who wants to release animals, but not viruses.
So was that just like, I wanted to make sure that I was reading that right. So that was like a flat plot line, right? Like that it was more about just freeing some animals than to free the virus.
Yeah, right. So Bruce Willis and the scientists and everybody from the future thinks that Brad Pitt and his Brad Pitt's character and his organization, the Army of the 12 Monkeys, which is where the title comes from, they think they're the ones responsible for this outbreak. But it just happens that they are also active at the same time. They are spray painting graffiti and protesting publicly. And so they're a very visible organization. They're an animal rights organization, among other things, possibly. And so, so he sets out to release, and you think he's going, it seems like he's going to go to his father's lab and release the lab animals that his father's using as part of his research, and that's how the virus is going to get out. And they go so far as kidnapping his dad to as part of whatever they're up to. But then it turns out what they actually were doing is releasing animals from the zoo. And so all the zoo animals are running around. And meanwhile, one of the lab technicians or postdocs, or it's unclear what his job is, but David Morse's character is the one who actually takes viral samples from the lab and intentionally releases those in a side activity. But everything that it's also suggested that perhaps Brad Pitt interactions with Bruce Willis's character in that institution are what inspire him to come up with this release the animals from the zoo plot, right? So there's all these threads of the attempts to change the past wind up just creating the past as they know it. Some
real early use of CG animals I noticed, which kind of worked, but it was very dated. So, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely very interesting. Terry Gilliam has always had an interesting visual eye and interest in creating high tech out of low tech things, right? Making there's just that aesthetic of let's kind of kit bash a bunch of.
The kit bash is perfect, yeah.
Objects from today in unusual ways to make futuristic looking, but also not like it's not 1950s futurism. It's not all clean lines and shiny surfaces and things like that. It's grungy and complicated and weird.
Yeah, it's a punk rock almost.
Yeah, there's maybe even a steam. It's not quite steampunk in the sense that it's not like retro future technology. But it does have kind of similar vibes. It's sort of built out of found elements as opposed to
a lot of like clear plastics on top of other plastics.
Yeah, layers and layers of things. Yeah, that's also probably part of the fun out of the low budget aspect.
Sure.
I think he's aiming for a lower cost to be able to make these sort of more avant-garde-ish films. So in thinking about these time movies, and this one is really heavily layered in terms of how many different actions of people from the future wind up impacting the past. Do you think that this is a movie? Do you think these stories are about the future, that they're trying to say that our lives are fated and we're kind of stuck on rails that we can't do anything about? Or do you think that this is a story about how you can't, that trying to change the past or worrying about changing the past is futile, and so you need to focus on the future that you can change?
I don't know. I think from the ending that I took from it, it's more of a the future is open in the sense of you don't have to obsess about it. And there are, yeah, and and that might be just the way I've been seeing my worldview as of late. But the whole aspect of the mental health part of it and how it how the pressure of the changing the future affected him, I think says that that it says that it to kind of not think of it in a sense of the finality, but to think of the future as more open and to not care so much about it. And I just go to the Key West. Florida.
That sure, yeah. Yeah, I know. It kind of the series in general has, and this film in particular, kind of highlighted for me the tension in that I really love these kinds of intricately plotted stories where everything that they think they're doing to change the past is actually creating the past. Of the new movies like Time Crimes and Primer also fit into that category,
right?
And Interstellar and all the other movies that we're talking about in the series. And I really admire those kinds of stories for just like how much craft has to go into constructing a plot like that. And yet at the same time, I don't really think, my worldview, it does tend much more towards an open future, that there are real choices that we can make, that we're not just living on rails. Possibly, maybe that's because, to the best of our knowledge, time travel isn't possible, so you don't have these kinds of retro causality situations. But yeah, I found it interesting
that we know of.
Well, yes, exactly, that we know of. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting tension, and so it made me think about maybe pay attention to the ending of the movie. What was your reading of that final scene on the airplane, where one of the women that we've seen as this panel of scientists from the future sits down on the plane next to David Morse, who we know now is taking an international, a jaunt around the world, a global itinerary to see this virus in a number of different cities. Because we've heard that that's where the first outbreaks happened, and we've heard them rattle off his list of where he has plane tickets to, and they're all the same cities. So it's very strongly suggested that that's what he's up to. And she sits down on the plane next to him and says that she's in the insurance business. What was your take on that?
I wasn't sure, to be honest. That part about I'm in the insurance business, does that mean she found out what he was doing and then aligned with it and then set up the whole virus, or did she, because she's the one that was sending him back? I don't know. I honestly did not know how to think about that ending. So
yeah, and one of the great things about this film is, for so long, almost everything has a double reading, right? You think that Bruce Willis really is a time traveler, but there's so many things that suggest, well, maybe he's not, and maybe he has a delusion about being a time traveler, and he's just constructing elements of that delusion from things that he's seeing around him.
True.
And so over the course of the film, he becomes convinced that he is delusional, and his psychologist becomes convinced that he is a real time traveler. And so the more, it kind of flips. And so there's always that tension of what is actually real, what should we believe, who should we believe. And so it feels like right up until that end scene, I think there's two ways to look at that. One is that this woman who we thought was an astrophysicist all this time really isn't a scientist and doesn't know what she's doing. And
that says a lot.
Maybe is part of Bruce Willis's delusion, right? He's somebody that he saw at this airport and added her into this delusion that he's been having. or what, and where I prefer to kind of to lean in the reading is that actually there is a possibility of changing the future, and that she sees herself as she's introducing herself as in the insurance business because she's the insurance policy to stop this guy from continuing his mission.
That's kind of how I saw it.
They had because they were Bruce Willis winds up getting shot because he's trying to shoot David Morris.
In 1912 or something.
Right, on the directive of these folks in the future that to stop the virus from spreading, and so but he fails in that, and so she come back as the insurance policy to prevent that, or at least to get a sample to be able to take a sample back to the future to develop a vaccine or cures or antiviral, something like that. But yeah, I chose. I think I lean towards just for pure choice, the more optimistic reading that there is some intervention going on there, and that it's not just one more element of a delusion on Bruce Willis's part, but it was an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've kind of reached the end of our time. There's a lot in this movie, so there's a lot more that could be said, but we'll leave that to folks to hash out maybe in the comments or on the Discord or somewhere like that. But yeah, if you have thoughts on 12 Monkeys, please feel free to reach out and share them with us. In the meantime, you can also rate and review this show. We appreciate everybody who does that, so that more folks can hear what we're talking about. And again, you can check out the notes for anything else that might be of interest in this series, this on loop series, these time travel stories. If you like that kind of thing, there's more of it. But we're going to wrap up with one last question for you, Evan. If you are stuck in a time loop of the Groundhog Day variety, where you have to watch a movie on repeat with one other person from your world, who are you watching with, and what are you watching?
I will watch. That's a good question. The first one that comes to mind is The Butterfly Effect, Ashton Kutcher's 2000s film, and I probably watch it with my dad and see what kind of crazy concoction plot that he comes up with.
Awesome. That sounds fun. I thought about this. So obviously, my wife is the person that, kind of by choice, if I was going to get stuck in a time loop, that's who I want to spend time with. But that's kind of the obvious answer. So I was trying to think a little bit more outside of the box. And, I think for this kind of scenario right now, my daughter's kind of at the age she's a first year in college. She's got a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, but, she's also sort of become more of a fully formed person. And so I think she would bring a lot of energy to that situation and be able to kind of create some positivity out of it. And I think the movie that would be fun to rewatch is the Michel Gondry film, Be Kind, Rewind.
Oh, yeah.
Partly because, so the plot of the movie is that these video store folks, they own like one of the last video rental places, and their video cassettes are conking out. And so they are recreating classic movies by, sort of filming them themselves on the lowest of low budgets, so that folks can, continue to rent Ghostbusters or what have you, in some version. So, sneakily you get Be Kind, Rewind, but you also get, at least little glimpses of a bunch of other classic movies in there as well. So that's one fun thing.
There you go.
It was also filmed in my hometown where I grew up in New Jersey, Passaic, New Jersey. So that's a fun little reminder of my childhood. And then also I just think, it might be good inspiration. If we're stuck in this time loop, we've got time to kill. It might inspire us to do our own sweeted, as they call it, version.
Sweeted. I haven't heard that in forever.
Of movies. And since my daughter is is a drama student, I think she would be a good fit for that. So that was my pick. If it were time loop about video games, my son would be my go-to. But since we're talking movies, I think I would go with my daughter. So those are my thoughts. I think those would be two fun times, and hopefully you get to enjoy a movie with your dad. But hopefully maybe not for all of time going forward.
We'll see.
Yeah, but so everybody, thanks for joining us on this conversation. Again, check everything out in this series, and remember, if you're going to geek, do it systematically.
Hey friends, it's your pal Will Rose here, and let me break the fourth wall a moment and look directly at you through the camera or speak directly to you in your earbuds. Yep, I'm talking to you, Susie. You too, Chad. You can now support Systematic Geekology on Fourth Wall. That's a website. You'll find all of our episodes, incredible merch like shirts and hoodies and mugs. Chad, I would love to see you in one of those shirts out in the wild. You get bonus episodes. We answer bonus questions. We have special shout outs. We have certain episodes that you pick. So you help us create and curate the content that we put out for the world to hear. You even get free merch. And you can support the show at different levels. You could join at the free level. Yep, we love free members, free support. Join it. Or you could become a sidekick for as little as $5 a month. You could join the elves and dwarves for $10 a month. You could become a wizard for $15 a month, or you could go to divinity school and become a cleric for $20 a month. And that's way cheaper than going to seminary, believe me. Or at $25 a month, you could become a superhero. And let me just say, we love all of our listeners, whether you support us at the free level or the superhero level. We love you. We love geeking out with you. Like, support, share the show. Love you.
This is Joshua Knoll. I am one of the hosts of this podcast. I am also host a few other shows on the Anazal Podcast Network that this show is a part of. If you want to hear more from me, you can check out the Whole Church Podcast, where TJ and I go through talking to people from various different church traditions to see what can be done to better harness church unity in the world today. You can also hear me on Be Living Water, where I talk about Taoist Christian beliefs and examine various media like the Book of Daniel and Les Miserables through a Taoist Christian perspective. You can also hear me as I do some of the voice work for the Bible After Hours, where the foul-mouthed preacher goes through the Bible from a more progressive point of view. Thank you guys for listening, and I hope you'll consider checking out these other shows on the Anazal Podcast Network.